the first subject I chose for you to begin with, because it's April, and next month is the Kentucky Derby, and we begin to think about racing horses. And so I wanted to present for you a history of the horse racing tracks in our county, beginning in 1850 to present. How I got interested in this was I had been down to Pendleton a number of years ago researching some other things, and discovered the evidence of the racetrack that was in Pendleton is still there. And you can see it, I'll show it to you later on. But that got me interested, because then I researched that track, and that led me into all of the others, and I found it quite interesting, and I hope you will too. The sport of horse racing has been around since man first began keeping records, and probably before that. Indeed, over 2,600 years ago, the Egyptians, who loved chariot racing and mounted horse racing, included them in their 638 BC Olympic Games. From those ancient arenas to modern race courses, it has been the sport of kings as well as that of the common man. The first American horse race track was on New York's Long Island in 1665. It didn't take long for the sport to spread all across America, including Indiana, where it has achieved the status as a major industry in our state. Several years ago, the Indiana horse industry was estimated to be a $1.3 billion agribusiness, employing more than 22,500 Hoosiers. At that time, it was estimated there were 14,300 horses in our state involved in racing. Madison County has long been a part of Indiana's horse racing tradition. In our county's infancy, races were mostly staged between hometown horses, wherever and whenever they could be held, the winner earning bragging rights and perhaps a few dollars in his pocket. Over time came the racetrack. Our county's horse race tracks have a rather unique history that one deserves a closer look. Now, spread throughout this presentation will be photographs that I have. I didn't take them, but I borrowed them from the internet, of horses I thought were quite beautiful. They're obviously a beautiful animal, and I've got several of them through here. Hoosier Park. Today, Anderson's Hoosier Park is the 8th and the youngest in a long lineage of racetracks devoted to the horse within the boundaries of our county. You see an aerial shot of it there to the right. The 7/8 of a mile dirt oval opened on September the 1st, 1994. That's hard to believe. It's been around that long, isn't it? When patrons attended the grand opening of the standard bred season. In 2013, Hoosier Park announced the discontinuance of the thoroughbred racing in favor of the long-standing Hoosier favorite, harness racing. Not only is harness racing a Hoosier favorite, it has been the choice in Madison County since the first track was ushered into existence 172 years ago. So we've been racing horses in Madison County for 172 years, and perhaps longer. In my research for other things that I do, I use Google Earth a lot. It is just a great tool for me to be able to sit at my desk in my home and travel to Elwood or Summitville or wherever and not have to put my coat on and zoom down in on something that I'm interested in seeing. And so I use it a lot. In my work as county historian, I've done this quite a bit, and I found something rather unique in the eastern side of Madison County. From the eastern side of Madison County, from Adams Township to Union to Richland to Monroe to Van Buren. That's the east side of our county. What I found was tracks. Here's Markleville and a racetrack above Markleville. Now you drive down 300 East or the Middletown Road, Markleville Road, I mean, you might not necessarily see that. But from the air, you see it. I'll let you watch and see how many of those tracks we have. A friend of mine who's into horses told me that these tracks, and you're going to see several of them, these tracks belong to people who race horses out at Hoosier Park. And these are their farms where they keep the horses, and these are the tracks at those farms where they work those horses out. Most of these people are from Florida and own tracks here, and then they travel the season between Florida and Indiana as the weather permits. This is track number 1 in Adams Township. I'll take you down on the ground and you can see it. It's on, here's 300 East, north of Markleville, and you can see it here, and the stables for the horses. Also in Adams Township are tracks 2, 3, and 4. Here, here, and here. You see they're different sizes. And when we go down on the ground for number 2, it's along 500 South. It's south of 500 South. 3 and 4 are basically beside each other. They're at the intersection of 500 South and 300 East. The Anderson Fair Association Foster Park Athletic Park, 1900 to 1994. The 7th track to appear in our county was initially called the Anderson Fair Association track. This is taken from a atlas, 1901 atlas of Anderson, and it shows the fairgrounds track laid out here. Here's White River, downtown Anderson, same situated where it is today. It was located on the grounds of the athletic park, also the location of the last fairgrounds to be located in or near Anderson. That is again a Google Earth shot of that racetrack. The association owned 1/2 mile track opened for a one-day tryout on July the 4th, 1900. Judging from a photograph presumed to be taken that day, the horse races were very popular. The photograph reveals a covered wooden grandstand filled to capacity with 2,600 of the 4,000 spectators. I looked up and found out the capacity for the grandstand in 1900 was 2,600, and I think you'll agree it's full. It's full. Interesting photograph, just horse and buggy, no automobiles yet. This is July 4th, 1900. It was a special day. The track was not to be opened for competition till later in the summer, but they opened it on July 4th that year for people to come and have events, such as on the racetrack here, not only were there horse racing, there was bicycle racing, and there was foot racing, and there was where you get three-legged bag racing, and there was every kind of racing you could think of. It was a celebration, and you can see how they were packed in here. And at one time, there was a picket fence that separated the spectators from the race course. And of course, these people here had a great seat.
Steve?
Yes?
When did they tear down the covered grandstand?
When did they tear down the covered grandstand? It burned. It burned. And then they built the one that we are familiar with. And I think that was sometime in either the late 30s or early 40s. Never been able to pin that date down, but I did find where that original grandstand did burn. While the races were popular, apparently interest in the fair was not. After only a few years and what was described as a general lack of interest in the fair by the public, the owners sold the property to the city of Anderson, who had plans to use the property for a city park. The sale was completed during the administration of Mayor Frank P. Foster, who served as mayor from 1910 to 1913. See, in those years, the mayor served 3 years, not 4. The renamed Foster Park was dedicated on July 4th, 1913, but in 1915, 2 years later, the name was changed again to Athletic Park, and harness racing continued there for a number of years, particularly during the annual summer fairs. I don't know why. it was changed from Foster Park back to Athletic Park? I don't know. Perhaps it is something like Mayor Baldwin in 1937. They named a bridge for him, and he didn't want that bridge. He didn't want the bridge named for him. So as soon as he got out of office, they changed the name back to the Meridian Street Bridge over White River by where Frisch's is. But at one time, that was Baldwin Bridge. Perhaps it was a similar situation here for Mayor Foster, that he didn't care for the name either, although I don't know why. I brought you this photograph. That's the racetrack during the March 1913 flood. And you can see the grandstand right here. White River went over its banks in 1930, worst flood we ever had, and flooded the racetrack. Another photograph exists taken in the summer of 1936, showing a packed grandstand watching racing under the lights. At some point after that, the roof was removed because by 1950s it was gone. And here is that photograph. We have determined it is 1936. It's really interesting. What do you think? How many of you remember the Anderson Free Fair? It was free to get in, but after that it wasn't free.
There wasn't anything free or fair about it.
But you remember all of the the Ferris wheel? Looking at the automobiles, we think it's 1936, but look how it's lighted and how well it is attended in 1936. That is the grandstand empty, and that's the one then that sometime after that caught fire and burned. A photograph taken, I think the photographer must be standing on the deck of the athletic pool, and he's taking his picture looking north across the field there that is the racetrack, obviously during the fair time. And that is the grandstand that was there in my childhood when I used to attend the Anderson Free Fair. That's now gone, of course. I found a couple of flyers relative to racing there. This is giving a purse of $650, and here's the 6 horses that were racing, and evidently the gentleman who's marked this, he liked Tilt Jester. I don't know how Tilt Jester came out in the race, but that's who he picked. But you'll notice the name on here of Hector Kirk. Raise your hand if that's a familiar name to you. Okay. Hector Kirk had the sale barn out on Alexandria Pike for years, and he was very active in horse racing. In fact, this shows him by the racetrack of Athletic Park. You can't see him very well, but he's the one in the hat here. And then this is Hector Kirk in his with his sulky. The horse's name was Curly Lambert, and this warming blanket that he's got on now is the property of the Madison County Historical Society. The family granddaughter gave it to us to help remember her grandfather, Heck Kirk. If you remember, that's how they used to start the horses at the racetrack. The big starting gate. That's Heck Kirk on the track. I went out there and I took this photograph. That's all that remains of the buildings or anything that is reminiscent of when the racetrack was there. That's all that's left. Back to my aerial views. We're now in Lafayette Township. That's track number 5. And it is on 50 West between 300 North and 360 North. Again, you can drive by these and you just won't see them. Sanford Moss Track, 1895 to 1934. The 6th track, and that was your question, what were the 5th and 6th? Here we go. Here, the 6th track on the list was not a conventional racing track, since regularly scheduled races were not held there. Instead, the half-mile dirt oval was used primarily for working out and training race horses owned by the property owner Sanford Moss, a well-known breeder and trainer of light harness horses. His stock was highly sought after in the big city markets. He lived just east of the track on his 2,200-acre farm, which was roughly bounded by today's 25th Street on the south and extended north to the river. The eastern boundary was Rabel Avenue, while the western edge of his property was near Park Road. And yes, if you're curious, he is a descendant of the Moss family, the Moss Mill, Moss Glass. They're all related, all related. The track was situated in the Woodsdale addition on the city's west side and lay between Meadow Lane, Woodside Drive, Nickel Avenue, and West 11th Street. Nearby was a cluster of natural springs, which furnished plenty of cool water for the thirsty animals. What I've done here is take a Google Earth shot and superimposed that racetrack over it in the Woodsdale addition to give you some idea of where it was. If you're coming out 32 on Nickel Avenue, past the Woodsdale, and here's where you turn into Maryland Drive, and here it is, I guess, Maryland Drive, and then Park Avenue. I found this in the newspaper. I'll read you the caption. It says, "Old racetrack reappears. Although the ground had been converted to farm more than 20 years earlier, an old racetrack west of the city, which was maintained by the late Sanford Moss for training of his horses, can be seen in the center of this 1956 aerial view made for the Soil Conservation Service. The track was located north of Nickel Avenue Road, running horizontally across the center of the picture. In about the 3000 block, Forest Manor and the east edge of Edgewood are to the left, while Westwood is immediately to the right." And what they've done is they shaded the photo so that you could see where the track was in that area. Anybody not clear on where that was? Okay. The earliest mention of Sanford Moss track dates to 1895, when it had a reputation of being one of the best tracks in this area. Moss achieved this during the track's construction by bringing in soil with a much higher clay content, making the surface much harder than otherwise would have been achieved using the adjacent soil. See, the standard-bred horse wants to run on a firmer ground than does the thoroughbred. He wants loose ground. So I'm told. I haven't talked to one, but somebody who owns one told me that. The only races contested there were known as matinee races, which were races held for fun with prizes being awarded occasionally. They were considered neighborhood affairs and were not advertised to attract spectators. However, the track was not used exclusively for horse training and racing. Now, here's something you're going to learn. The local members of Boyville used the racetrack for track meets. Boyville was a national organization designed to give boys knowledge about the operation of a city. Regular meetings of the local chapter were held in the east basement room of the library. On occasion, the boys would walk out to the Moss racetrack and hold their meets. One member recalled doing this from 1906 to 1908. Additionally, a baseball field was laid out within the track's infield. The Anderson cricket clubs made use of the grounds and played their games there. And in 1896, it was reported that Sanford Moss had 40 head of racing horses on his farm a mile west of the city, 30 of which were being trained to race. His market was the East Coast, the New York area. At that same time, Moss claimed he had the fastest 2-year-old filly in Indiana, whose name was Nana Chamberlain. Sanford Moss died in 1932, and approximately 2 years later, the ground upon which the track was located was plowed and converted into farm use. That is Sanford Moss, and I assume that's Nana Chamberlain beside the stable on his property there on what is today Nickel Avenue. Monroe Township, track number 6. It's on County Road 175 East between 1250 North and 1300 North. The Elwood Driving Park and Fair Association, 1895 to circa 1917. In the 1890s, driving park associations were popular names for horse racing tracks. They provided a place for city horses to get a good run, as well as a place for horse racing and training. There were 2 such tracks in our county. The first one is the county's 5th oldest track. It was the Elwood Driving Park and Fair Association, which was organized on the 3rd day of October, 1895, by a group of prominent Elwood men who served as its board of directors. The official opening occurred on August 25th the following year. Situated on 40 acres, a mile and a half northeast of Elwood and on the Duck Creek Township side of the line dividing it with Pipe Creek Township, were the fairgrounds. Dominating the grounds was a 2,500-seat covered grandstand for race spectators. The track appears to have been a half-mile dirt oval that featured harness racing, which lasted until the fairgrounds closed before World War I. The fair became a victim of a shift in interest to larger county fairs. And what is next here is a plat map that I have showing the track just north of Elwood. This is the dividing line between Pipe Creek and Duck Creek Townships. And if you're familiar, I'll show you here in just a minute, but Elwood High School sits just south of that. That is the only photograph that I've ever been able to find of that Elwood racetrack and its grandstand. Again, using Google Earth, my arrow points to where the track was located, and I think if you want to use your imagination, you can kind of see an outline here. This is the Township Line Road, and this is Elwood Junior Senior High School. Another beautiful animal, just beautiful. Tracks number 7 and 8 are in Richland Township. Now these are just my number designations for them. That's not what they're known as, but you can see their proximity. The first one is 500 North and 500 East, this one. And number 8 is 450 North and 500 East. And again, you'd have a hard time seeing these back off the road, but I suppose that's by design and purpose. And then track number 9 in Richland Township, and it's on 300 North between 300 East and 375 East. These, for the most part, I guess, are quarter-mile tracks. There may be some half-mile tracks in there, depending upon what the owner wants to use. The North Anderson Driving Park, 1892 to 1894, a short life. Located on an 84 acres of ground in what is today North Anderson, and bounded by today's School Street, Hartman Road, Broadway, and the CSX Railroad track, was the North Anderson Driving Park Association, the 4th track in our county's history. The 1-mile track began operations in 1892 and featured annual races, complete with a grandstand and several outbuildings, including large stables. For reasons unknown, the races were not as well attended as the association members had hoped. The grandfather of a good friend of mine who is now gone, you may know the McCullough name, and Neil McCullough is who I'm speaking of. His grandfather was one of the stockholders in this track. And I was talking to Neil one day about this track, and I said, did your grandfather ever indicate why the track was not well attended, not popular, didn't survive very long? And he said, yes. He says it was his opinion that it was too far out of town. too far out of town that people didn't want to go out there. It was too long of a trek to get out. Now, you know where I'm telling you this is. This is where Heckman Buick and Hunter Chevrolet used to be. I'm talking about that property right there. And it was too far out of town. But that was his reasoning. It was not popular for that reason. This, coupled with a refusal by the stockholders to pay the property assessments, that's another story, led to an order by the circuit court in 1894 that that property be sold. No photographs of it. The best I can do for you is from an insurance map that I found that shows you the Anderson Driving Park here, and this would be, in that time it was First Street. We know it today as School Street. And here you see, and these buildings around the side and the grandstand are in yellow for insurance purposes, indicating it is made of wood. My arrow on this plat map points to that area that I just told you. Here's Hartman Road. This is the old Michigan division of the New York Central that ran right behind it, that still today goes to Grand Rapids. And the area for the driving park was here. Using Google Earth again, I've shown you the boundaries of the park: Hartman Road, Railroad, School Street, and this is North Broadway. So this area right in here is where you all were familiar with Hunter Chevrolet, Heckman Buick, and the field that's north of it. In 1895, on July the 4th, they had a Civil War fight here. Whoa! A mock Civil War fight. The war had been over 30 years. But to celebrate the 4th of July in Anderson that year, they had a huge parade downtown, one of the most spectacular parades the city has ever witnessed as far as people turning out for it. When the parade was over, the people then were invited to go out to the driving park for the mock Civil War battle. So the Anderson Streetcar Company, which by then was electrified, they sold tickets that day to transport people out there, and they sold 20,000 tickets to take people out to witness the Civil War battle. It was estimated the crowd out there was 23,000. The rest of them walked. When they got there, the fight was here in this field, and the Union forces, which prevailed, were led by General Lew Wallace. General Lew Wallace, from Civil War fame, later wrote what? Ben-Hur from Crawfordsville. He was the general that led the Union forces. Expended over 20,000 blank cartridges that day. Anyway, that was one of the uses that they did with the driving park to help promote it. In Union Township are tracks 11, look at that little guy, 10 and 11. 10 is on 150 South between 300 East and 400 East, you see it there. And then 11 is on 300 East between 150 South and 200 South. Again, far enough back off the road, you wouldn't know they're there. The Madison County Joint Stock Agricultural Society was in operation from 1868 to 1890. A county fair was the reason for the existence of yet another 1/2 mile dirt oval located on the grounds of the Madison County Joint Stock Agricultural Society. That's a mouthful, but that's what they called themselves. The property was situated between present-day 8th, 3rd, John, and Madison Avenues. 8th, 3rd, John, and Madison Avenues in Anderson. This is an 1900 map of Anderson, and you can't read it, but it says Fairgrounds right there. This is Madison Avenue, today's Madison Avenue, going out where it crosses the river. At the time that it wasn't called Madison Avenue, it was called the Fairgrounds Road. And you didn't take a bridge over the river, you went through the river on the Fairgrounds Ford. Formally organized in May of 1868, the Agricultural Society opened the fairgrounds in the fall of that year. The 12-acre grounds contained a 1/2 mile dirt oval, which was situated roughly between what is today 6th Street to near 3rd Street and Madison Avenue and Hendricks Street. Parts of the track were marked with big rocks designating its boundaries. In other words, rather than have a fence around the track, they just had big boulders at the curves so that the riders knew where they were, drivers knew where they were going. One of those rocks can still be seen in the area today if you know where to look. Again, a map of Anderson at that time, and you see the old fairgrounds. This is roughly 3rd, this is 8th Street here, this is Madison Avenue, and this would be the CSX tracks here. This all was the fairgrounds, but the racetrack was within the fairgrounds. This is that rock here. The day I went to take that picture, the property owner came out and sat down in that chair, folded her arms and just looked at me. I got my picture, thanked her, and left. The track was utilized for the exhibition of horses in harness and under saddle. Trotters, pacers, and runners were very popular and drew large crowds. From 1868 until 1887, the annual fair was well attended. Thursdays were always the best days to attend, as the best races usually held that day, and thousands of spectators lined the track to watch the racing. In the late 1880s, interest declined, and faced with increasing debt, the fairgrounds and the track closed in 1890. With the discovery of natural gas in our area in 1887, manufacturing bloomed, and with it people with the need for places to live. The former fairgrounds and its racetrack became prime real estate. Local entrepreneur James M. Donnelly seized upon the opportunity, and he purchased the old fairgrounds and platted it into city lots. It was his son Wade who was instrumental in the development of Edgewood some 40 years later, if you remember the name Wade Donnelly. This is a plat map of that fairgrounds addition. You can see it's all laid off in lots. That would have been a beautiful place because there's stately trees in that area. They're there today. It would have been a beautiful place for home building, and that was the appeal for it, and certainly the reason why it was worth more money in real estate than it was as a fairgrounds. Known as the Fairgrounds Addition. Again, using my friend Google Earth, I roughly show you the boundaries of the racetrack within this neighborhood that's there today. In Van Buren Township is track number 12. It's located on just off of State Road 9 between 1400 North and 1450 North. The Fall Creek Fair Association, 1868 to 1876. Included on the grounds was a 1/3 mile time track, which was constructed and first used in September of 1868. It did not take long for the organizers to realize they needed more ground, which was accomplished by the purchase of additional acreage, extending the property to the old Pendleton and Eden Pike, which is today's State Road 9. Along with the expansion came a larger racetrack. In 1872, the original 1/3 mile track was increased to a 1/2 mile. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, this is Pendleton, and that track was located about a mile down out of town. Today, Pendleton has expanded out to that, and so it's in Pendleton today. The track on the grounds of the Madison County Joint Stock Agricultural Society in Anderson and the track located on the grounds of the Fall Creek Fair Association south of Pendleton both had their beginnings in 1868 and thus tie for the title of the second oldest racetracks in Madison County. A group of Pendleton citizens calling themselves the Pendleton Agricultural Society organized that Fall Creek Fair Association on the 20th day of July in 1867. That same year they purchased 18 acres of ground 3/4 of a mile south of Pendleton on which to hold annual fairs primarily to benefit the people of southern Madison County. In 1874, beginning September the 8th and running through the 11th, a variety of races were featured during the 7th annual fair. Among them were the Green Trot Race for horses that never went. Now I had to ask somebody, what's that mean, a horse that never went? It's a simple answer. It's a horse that's never raced before. Sometimes it's just too obvious. Also a fast-paced free-for-all, a 3-minute trot, a fast trot, free-for-all, and a running race which consisted of a half-mile dash. That would be people, not horses. Unfortunately, the track's expansion put so much of a financial strain on the society that the directors were forced to dissolve the association in February of 1876. Of all the tracks constructed in the 19th century in our county, only one can still be seen, or at least a portion of it can be. On the east side of South Pendleton Avenue in Pendleton, one can still see what remains of that old racetrack. Located in a pasture just off the road is the faint outline of the track that for 8 years witnessed the only form of organized horse racing in that part of our county. And again, using my friend Google Earth, my arrow points to, and I don't know how well you can see it, but there is a faint outline right there. This is Pendleton Avenue coming south out of Pendleton, where it crosses the railroad tracks and intersects with 67 and 9. But the racetrack is there, and I'll take you down on the ground. There you can see it a little bit better. You see that? The boundary markers here are for the fairgrounds themselves in Pendleton years ago, and you can see how the city has grown out around the fairgrounds. On the Clark Street, which was the north boundary of the fairgrounds, today is a pillar. That was the gate that got you into the fairgrounds. That was the gate that got you in the fairgrounds. If you go down to the other end of Clark Street, the east end of it, you'll see 2 more pillars down there. And this is what can be seen of the track. Goes around. I did not go out there. But while I was there, across the way were horses. Well, I did everything a foolish old man could do to try to get those horses over. They weren't having any of me. So they didn't come, but I thought what a neat shot that would have been to have had those horses over by that racetrack. I've got several slides here of it, let you see it. Again, just look for that indentation there, and here below it is the racetrack that I just described to you. I guess every time I look at this, I'm hoping those horses will magically appear. They don't. This is private property today. Isn't that a beautiful shot? The Madison County Agricultural Society, 1850 to 1855. The honor of being the first horse racing track in Madison County goes to one about which we know the least. From 1850 to 1855, the Madison County Agricultural Society held its annual fair in Anderson and leased a 25-acre site bounded by present-day John Street, Madison Avenue, 10th Street, and 8th Street. Here, a horse racetrack of unknown size and known simply as the old racetrack at the west end of 10th Street contested the first horse races in Madison County. The first fair was held there September 14th and 15th, 1850. Fairs were held here annually until the lease expired in 1855. Just to back that up for you. Where our courthouse government center sits in downtown Anderson today, years ago was just a stand of trees. And it was decided in 1832 that they would build a courthouse on that site. So they cleared the trees and left stumps. And on those stumps, that became the fairgrounds. And on those stumps was where people displayed their pumpkins and their cucumbers and what have you. And that was the fair until it moved out here on 10th Street. The society, having no suitable site on which to continue the fair, was forced to go out of existence. Where it was located was, this is Madison Avenue, this is 10th Street, this is John, and this is 8th Street. This is Mays Park. Doesn't look like that today. The city has done a wonderful job down there of making a playground area of it. I took this shot was taken long before that. But this was the site of that fairgrounds for 5 years, and somewhere in that site was a racetrack. There was one track that may not have achieved the status of the 8 more well-known tracks in our county, but nonetheless was equally enjoyed by those who raced their horses there. It was on a piece of property known as the Blackledge Farm, located at the northeast corner of the intersection of County Road 100 West and State Road 128. Here, youngsters would race both bareback and saddle on ponies and quarter horses around a 1/4 mile track in the early 1940s. One of the members of our historical society shared that story with me because she was one of the riders. And the area she's talking about, this is State Road 128, this is County Road 100 East, or Madison Avenue, and it was in this farm right here where, as a child, they raced horses. He never quits. Without question, there have probably been more places to race horses in our county since its inception in 1823. Sadly, their locations and stories are unknown to me. And with that, I close today's presentation.